A bombshell document dump links George Soros to the Russian collusion hoax. Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
You know, as a guy said on Twitter today, I got bad news for everyone out there, folks, because we're all now in possession of information that could lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton.
Yes, Matt. Well, it's Thursday, so that means we're serving up another episode of Blaze News Investigates. And with news like today, we had to go through and bring in Sean Davis. He's the CEO and co-founder of The Federalist. Sean, thanks so much for joining us, because we're not lacking for any news this week, this month, this year.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel like the past 2 weeks have been drinking through a fire hose with all of the declassifications and new blockbusters we've gotten.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And it looks like bad news for Hillary Clinton. There's an explosive declassified appendix to the 2023 Durham report. It was released today and exposes how Clinton personally, she went through and approved a plan that was proposed by Julian Smith, who was going to magnify the Russia hack scandal to hurt Trump. So take us through just what you have gone through with these documents and that you've seen today.
Yeah, so what was released today came out of Senator Chuck Grassley's office. It's a declassified annex, 20 or 25 pages, to the Durham report that came out a couple years ago. And it includes in it some evidence and information we haven't seen before. And the main takeaway to me from this new document was that our intel services, because of information they had intercepted from Russia, knew very early on in 2016, long before the whole Crossfire Hurricane thing was launched, our intel services were very well aware that the Clinton campaign had a plan to tie Trump to Russia, that one major purpose of the plan was to distract from Hillary's emails. And they knew all of this long before they ever launched their Crossfire Hurricane little escapade. And so it suggests to me a far more nefarious intent in what the FBI and CIA were up to than even we had previously assumed.
Yeah, Sean, I mean, I too am reeling like Mike Benz and others, everyone online just pouring over this sort of live today. It was interesting to me. It was like a group effort. But this letter where, you know, HRC approved Julia's idea about Trump and Russia hackers hampering U.S. elections. This should distract people from her own missing email, especially if the affair goes to the Olympic level. We're going to the Olympic level. With or without trans people. The point is making the Russians play a U.S. domestic issue. And then, as he pointed out, and others pointed out, say something like a critical infrastructure threat. I mean, and this is all over the place. I mean, the exact phrases that they knew would help trigger and justify this, they're coming up with them in a sort of in real time as you watch this unfold. And really, this is just proving, you know, the work that you've done for years, others, Molly and others at the Federalist, and everywhere else have done for years. It's like Christmas because, to me, because all this stuff is coming out. And it's, you know, it's not surprising, right? But it's there it is. So the first question I have is, why in the hell has it taken this many years for this information to come out?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is that until now, we actually didn't have people running these agencies, even in spite of Trump having been president, you know, from 2021 to the beginning of 2025. It wasn't until now that we actually had people in these positions who were interested in transparency. So back in, I think, September of 2020, heading into the election, we reported at the Federalist that Gina Haspel had been personally blocking the release of a lot of these documents. You'll recall that Haspel was Pompeo's pick to run the CIA when he moved over to state. Mm-hmm. We also reported that Haspel had been personally banking on Trump losing in order to keep a lot of these documents that Gabbard has declassified hidden. And so it's just, even given what we knew before 2 weeks ago, it's shocking how much even people in Trump's own administration during the first term were doing things to block transparency and accountability that the whole country needed to know, and that it took this extraordinary election of Trump in 2024 for him to finally get people in power who are actually interested more in transparency and rule of law than they were in covering the tracks of the corrupt people who had run the agencies before them.
Well, Sean, it's like we're playing the greatest hits right now, right? The memos come out and they expose how Clinton's and the DNC and why not just add George Soros and the Open Society Foundation, right? Like this is the names that everybody has known for so long, but now we're getting the documents that actually show, line by line. And we have the VP of the Open Society Foundation, Bernardo is his last name. So how do we go through and make sure that people are actually understanding what is coming out? Because it feels like right now there is a document dump day in and day out, and it's hard even for all of us to keep up with this news as it's breaking.
Yeah, so this document is actually a little complex. So what they have in it at the beginning, the latter half talks about the con job against Carter Page, but I'd say the first 15 to 20 pages are about a hack of the DNC and the Open Society Foundation, which is the Soros group. And it was, whether it was Russians or other hackers, I don't think we definitively know. But they were able to find what they said were emails referencing this Clinton plan to kind of rig the 2016 election by making all these Russian claims. And so a lot of this intel that's included in there is English translation of Russian discussion of emails which they had obtained. You read some of these emails and they're in English, and yet you'll have a translator's note and you'll think that's a little odd. Why is that in there? And it's because a lot of this they were having to. It was an English email which was translated into Russian and then translated back into English. But the most interesting aspect about it is you have what appears to be contemporaneous evidence that lots and lots of people knew at the time, even within the Democrat elite circles, that Hillary Clinton was planning to run this little Russia op. And to me, what's interesting is not what Hillary Clinton did, because we know she hired and funded Christopher Steele. We know the whole thing arose out of Oppo research from the Clinton campaign. What I find most interesting is that the Russians knew what she was up to. Our intel knew what she was up to. Our intel knew that the Russians knew what she was up to, which had to mean that if you had a brain in your head at the time working for U.S. intel, you would see that and you'd say, wow, this means the Russians knew what she was doing, which means they might have been able to manipulate what she was doing. They might have been able to use someone like Christopher Steele or Igor Danchenko, the primary subsource of the Steele dossier. They might have been able to use and manipulate those people to in turn manipulate our political process by knowing what Hillary was up to. And yet at no point did Brennan or Comey or Clapper ever take that into account as they launched their witch hunt against Donald Trump.
This is always, Sean, the puzzling thing to me. It always comes down to this twisted pretzel, right? And you look at it and go, wait a minute. Who was colluding with Russians again? Who was getting info from Russians again? The Clintons famously tens of millions of dollars from Russians. But here you have the Russian intelligence service knowing something that, the only people who didn't know, like you said, the Russians knew, our intelligence service knew that they knew, and of course the elite Democrats knew. The only people who didn't know were the American people. And that would make me think this all sounds like, what was that phrase again? Election interference. Election interference on all sides. I don't know how they get away with this thing with Russia. It's a very weird deal, and it's tied into, I think, I wonder what your opinion is here. I think it's tied into trying to play off a boomer, Cold War mindset of Russians as the bad guys. That's like in there. They think that that's like a tricky thing to do to make the Russians the bad guys. And then you combine that with the fact that all of this stuff has to be justified with, foreign governments in order to, jumpstart the intelligence community and give them a subterfuge to start spying on and interacting in domestic affairs. Is that accurate?
No, I think that's totally accurate. And it's fascinating to me. It's almost Kafka-esque that after, 10 years of us hearing Russia interfered, it actually is true that one of the presidential campaigns in 2016 was colluding with Russia to interfere with our election results. That campaign was Hillary Clinton. It wasn't Donald Trump. It was Hillary Clinton's campaign that funded Christopher Steele to do all this nonsense. Now, you might say, well, Christopher Steele was just a former British spy. That's true. He was also on the payroll of Oleg Deripaska, a sanctioned Russian oligarch at the time he was doing all this.
Yes.
Oleg Deripaska was trying to get DOJ and state to let him into the U.S. Oleg Deripaska was using Christopher Steele to get to Bruce Orr, who was at DOJ at the time, to help him out. And I'll remind your audience, who was Bruce Orr? That was the husband of Nellie Orr, the Fusion GPS researcher who was helping to put together this dossier. So from top to bottom, there was a 2016 presidential campaign colluding with Russia the whole time, knowingly, to interfere with our election. And it was the campaign of Hillary Clinton.
Well, wouldn't it be a shame if somebody named Barack Obama actually helped cover it all up? Oh, wait, we got that today, too. There is so much that has happened. There was a memo that came out that said Obama sanctioned the use of all the administrative levers to minimize the fallout of the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. It went on to say that from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the FBI does not possess any kind of direct evidence against Clinton because of the timely deletion from the email servers. Help break this one down, Sean.
Yeah, so I think it's important in there. What you're seeing in that excerpt is a Russian interpretation of what's going on in American political affairs. And so, I have a very hard time. It's hard enough understanding your own country's politics, let alone that of a country where you don't know anyone and you don't even speak the language. So that was the Russian interpretation of what was going on based on maybe it was hacking, maybe it was spying, maybe it was just their general political intel. But you brought up Barack Obama. Barack's got an interesting conundrum right now because he was president when this all happened. He allowed it to happen. He's the one who ordered the ICA. He's the one who kind of helped hatch this plan in the Oval Office in January 5th, 2017, to hold information back from Trump to go after Mike Flynn. He's at a crossroads now, and he can kind of do one of two things. He can go down the Colonel Jessup route from A Few Good Men. You're darn right I ordered the code red. I did it. I knew what I was doing. It had to be done. You need me on that wall. In which case, he becomes immediately culpable and liable and potentially puts himself in legal jeopardy for everything that happened. The other avenue he can go down is to say, I told my underlings, I told these intel chiefs, they needed to get the right intel. They needed to give me the facts so that I could make decisions on what to do. How was I to know that they were going to cook the books? How was I to know that they would lie to me about what they knew? How was I to know that they were going to defraud a FISA court to spy on my political opponent? If anyone's a victim here, it's me, Barack Obama, because my own people defrauded me and lied to me. And that's the real problem that I think Comey and Clapper and Brennan and all the other underlings have right now. Is they have the possibility to end up twisting in the wind if Barack Obama at some points decides it's too hot and he needs to cut him loose.
But before we jump back in, we have to talk about our ranchers. American farms are getting crushed while grocery stores keep stocking all that meat that comes in from overseas. But 85% of the so-called grass-fed beef in stores is actually imported. That's why you need to look at goodranchers.com. It's 100% American. You know that it is born, raised, and harvested right here on local family farms, and it tastes amazing. Summer is in full swing, and nothing beats grilling out with your friends and family. You can choose from all their steaks and burgers and chicken. They even have all the wild-caught seafood, and you're definitely going to taste the difference. And you actually get to support real American ranchers with every box. And right now, when you subscribe, you can get free meat for life. That's your choice between Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or wings in every box. All you have to do is use the code Jill, and they'll knock off an extra $40 off. So go to goodranchers.com, use the code Jill, and back the people who actually feed this country. It's Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Well, let's go ahead and fast forward to Brennan and Clapper and setting the record straight, because they came out with an op-ed in the New York Times where they were setting the record straight, as they say, on all the intelligence that was out against them. But it turned out to be patently false. So why are the people who were manufacturing the Russia hoax now so suddenly eager, Sean, to rewrite the story? We're getting all of the declassifications right now. So now they're coming out and saying, oh, no, we're going to set the record straight.
Well, yeah, they actually lied. They doubled down on their lies, Brennan and Clapper did in that New York Times op-ed, and they claimed we never put the Steele dossier, the dodgy Steele dossier, in the ICA. It was never in there. It was only an annex in a classified version. That's a total lie. And the documents that Tulsi Gabbard released show it. We have chapter and verse. We have the actual quotes that they used in a very, very secret version of the ICA that referenced the Steele dossier, that used it to justify its key judgments. And it's actually fascinating to look at the little sleight of hand that they were playing. They had a version of the ICA that they released to the public and that they gave to Congress. And it is true, that particular version did not reference the Steele dossier, nor did it rely on the Steele dossier for its key judgments. But they also had a much more secret version, which they gave to Obama and other top intel decision makers, which absolutely included that. And there were 4 bullet points initially that undergirded their main judgments that Putin wanted Trump to win. They eliminated the 4th bullet in its footnote, which directly referenced the Steele dossier in that. And they removed that from the version they gave to Congress, so that when they go to Congress and they say, well, you have the version here in front of it, we never relied on it. That is such a corrupt, fraudulent act there. They knew what they gave to Obama had the Steele dossier in it. They knew it referenced it in the main body, and yet they go to Congress and lie about it because they knew that what they had given to Congress made it look like they were in the clear. And now they repeat those lies again in the New York Times. If that's not evidence of a corrupt, fraudulent conspiracy in an obviously guilty mind, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it really is unfathomable. I mean, it is just the direct and constant lying. But my one problem with this is that the media is not going to stop. You know, we should, when we mentioned the op-ed, we should just talk about the media as a whole. I think Matt Taibbi had a great reply to Glenn Greenwald today when he said there's no way for any corporate media outlet to cover this story at all. Logically, it can't be done without making major admissions. It'll have to be reported out entirely by independents. And so really this is up to people like you at the Federalist and us at the Blaze and everyone else like Taibbi, et cetera, to come together and just start putting out the story, because they can't do it because they were the ones colluding, and it's just direct contradiction. But they keep on directly contradicting. I mean, so do you have any predictions about whether this is, you know, their final suicide or in front of the nation, or are they going to win this? Because what do you think they're going to do? They have to just keep a straight face and say either we're not talking about it or directly lie to the camera.
You're right. They only have 2 options. They can pretend it never happened and never covered it and hope it goes away, or they can lie about it. And you used a perfect word there to describe your role. You said media were colluding. They were not duped. They were not lied to. The corrupt corporate media were willing co-conspirators in this conspiracy to defraud the United States. And so, of course, they're not going to come clean. You know, they'd have to go give up all their amazing little journalism and Pulitzer Prizes for all the lies they fed. They would have to admit that they were co-conspirators. That is an extinction level event for the corrupt corporate media. And, you know, it's just fascinating to watch them handle it, because they really can only lie or pretend it didn't happen, which only continues to erode the credibility that they have in this country still.
Well, I think it came out of the Revolver, but there was a headline of Brennan is still running the CIA. And I want to take you now, with that in mind, to a friend of the show, J. Michael Waller, put something out on X last night. He said, for the fun of it, let's ask if John Brennan had been a Russian agent to destroy America's constitutional republic and confidence in the intelligence community, what would he have done differently? That, I think, cuts right to the point of the entire narrative as a whole. Like, if you were out to do something bad and nefarious, would you have changed any step along the way, Sean?
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think it's important to remember that Brennan was an avowed communist. This was a guy who was a member, I believe, of the Communist Party. He eventually disavowed it, pretended it was never real. But everything he did is exactly what you might expect from a communist wanting to subvert the institutions of the U.S., lead people to have no faith in their government, to have no faith in the rule of law. You couldn't have scripted it any better. And if anyone appears to have been a marionette of Russian interests, boy, howdy, it looks like former communist John Brennan, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We should say Tulsi also echoed these sentiments about elements within the intelligence community. Let's take a look at that.
So yes, there are people who are still working within the intelligence community who had a hand in this. As we are identifying them, it will give us the opportunity to make sure that they and others like them who, again, are so willing to weaponize intelligence to subvert the will of the American people can no longer work in the intelligence community.
Now, Sean, you know this as well as anyone, and if you spend any time in Washington, D.C. with the good guys, supposedly, you recognize the paranoia that exists in that city for good reason, because she's almost being moderate in what she's talking about. And the Revolver article, it's got a wild headline. Brennan is still running the CIA, but it strikes me that there's a lot of truth to this, and it's an enormous part of the problem and why it's very, very difficult for people like Tulsi to operate.
Yeah, there's a reason we call it the deep state or the permanent administrative state. We allegedly get a new government every 4 years, and you have the political people leave, and you would think they're the ones always controlling these agencies. But there are thousands and thousands of permanent bureaucrats who view the politicians who come in and out as just passing fads. They'll wither and fade away like the grass, but it's the permanent bureaucracy that'll be there forever. And it's the permanent bureaucracy that actually has the right to rule. It's basically noblesse oblige without the noblesse part of it. And so I think Tulsi has a very valid point when she talks about elements within the intel community who do not view themselves as subject to the direction of political officers. They think they have a right to rule these agencies, and if they have to defraud or lie to the people in charge of them to get their way, they're happy to do that.
Well, Jill, this is why Sean Davis is one of our favorite people, a great follow on Twitter, and is doing amazing things with the Federalist.
Yes, and I'm actually surprised we got Sean on the show because he's out there doing huge things right now because, Joe Rogan, shout out. Let's go ahead and take a look. Sean put out there. Gotta add featured on the Joe Rogan Experience to the old bio. So, we're happy that you're still humble, Sean.
Well, y'all are awesome. Thank you for having me on.
Well, anytime. Absolutely. This has been fun because it's playing the hits, but it's also trying to get the information out there and telling people like, hey, this wasn't just us talking about this a few years ago. The documents are coming out right now that are showing that this thing actually needs to be taken seriously. So, Sean, we'll definitely have you back on the show soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Don't go anywhere. Mike Howell is coming up next. Well, some bourbons chase trends, and Flying Ace actually chases legacy. It's straight bourbon the way it's meant to be. It's supposed to be bold and balanced and unapologetically American. There's no gimmicks or fluff. This is just real whiskey made for people who still believe in hard work, all the high standards, and doing things the right way. So whether you're winding down after a long day or raising a glass with good company, Flying Ace delivers every time. And it's not about hype. It's about heritage, about getting back to what bourbon was always supposed to be. So if that sounds like you're kind of poor, then it's time to level up. Go buy it online at flyingacespirits.com and use the code BLAZE for free shipping. Blaze News Investigates is where we dig into all the stories that the legacy media wants you to forget. And when it comes to cover-ups, few are bigger than the Biden auto pen scandal. Now, the guy with the pen wasn't really the guy in charge. The DOJ, they don't want to talk. In the White House, they were swearing that Joe was still as sharp as ever. But how are we supposed to believe all of this? So joining us now is Mike Howell. He's the president of the Oversight Project. And Mike is also a Blaze News contributor. So we don't want to leave that out. Some of the important things that we make you write for theblaze.com. So Mike, obviously everybody is taking note of the Biden auto pen scandal. And we want to get to the bottom of this. And the DOJ and the White House, everybody's going to help turn everything over, right? That's how it's been going.
Well, unfortunately, that's not how it's been going. We're facing some major litigation hurdles on the simplest of the tasks that we have out. Like, for instance, we're in court right now asking for what legal opinions the Biden administration may have relied upon as it related to the auto pen usage. Simple. These documents either exist or they don't. And if they do, you just send them forward. We honestly thought it would be we ask, they come out, but it turned into no, you're going to have to sue. And then it turned into Judge Janine, who takes command of the U.S. Attorney's Office, and her attorney saying, we're not giving it to you at all, and we're going to talk to you in September about it. And so there's a massive political disconnect between what's coming out of, the White House. President Trump talks about this all the time, Attorney General Bondi, and then what happens in the courtroom, the very real tangible things that could move this investigation along instead of, resorting to expensive litigation to fight over things that could easily have been accomplished without litigation at all.
Why the hell is this happening? I mean, why is this happening?
Yeah, good question, Matt. I think the answer isn't, in my mind, terrible motivations or secret plots. I think it's unfortunately just simpler, and it's something that holds time. That Republicans and their administration struggle to take full control of the bureaucracy. The DOJ is a beast. I don't think that our litigation is what Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, wakes up every morning thinking about and going to bed, thinking about. I think they just haven't asserted political control throughout the system where, the president's priorities are reflected in the litigation posture. That being said, like, I'm not happy to be on a program, talking about it. We tried every which way through the most senior levels of DOJ saying this is dumb. We don't need to fight about this. It's a simple document. Everyone wants it out. Why are we having to resort to this? But those things don't work. And I think it's because there's not enough people who are dedicated to the mission. There's not enough time in the day, and the president's priorities are getting lost along the way.
So what are the next steps? Do we have to sit there and wait for somebody to come up with some document and just say, oh, you know what? We've decided today's the day.
Well, hopefully they're watching the Blaze because, or, everything else, and they just break through. This need not be in court, but the next step that we know for certain is September, when we have to go back to court and argue again. Now, obviously, it'd be very unfortunate to have to wait that long, and that doesn't mean it comes out just that day. In fact, these documents may not even exist. Maybe the White House didn't even issue separate, legal opinions through the Department of Justice governing Biden's auto pen usage, but even the absence of that would be very informative. These are things that need to be in front of Comer and others as they proceed through their investigations. I mean, this is 101 stuff. You go into these interviews when you're ready to interview the people, but we have a political timeline here. It's not, a court case. It's that there's a calendar, there's August recess, members are gone. Then it's going to be about the midterms. And so this isn't like a regular court case. We need to start now and we need to move fast. And that means the whole system, including the executive branch, needs to cooperate and assert themselves in accord with the president's priorities. I mean, right now, Fox News, if you turn it on, is every single commercial break is about their auto pen documentary that they released, which is great and all, but everyone's talking about it. The president's talking about it. It's everywhere. Yet, the simplest of things that the executive branch could do, they're not doing. And in fact, they're doing the opposite of that and making it worse. And I mean, this is the pattern. This is the hole that we're in. This administration is doing great work across the board, but in this transparency and accountability space, just cannot get traction.
Tell us a little bit about the Politburo testimony from ex-Biden aide Steve Ricchetti, who testified for a long time and said some interesting things.
Yes. So, they were pleading the fifth for a while. That was because Neera Tanden came in and said, as the person in control of the paper, she barely ever saw Biden. And so that spooked a lot of people. It broke kind of the, united defense that a lot of people thought the Biden Politburo would offer. I mean, I read it from a legal perspective as her throwing a lot of her colleagues under the bus, and she shook the system a little bit with that limited hangout disclosure. And so then you get a bunch of people immediately after, scrambling and taking the fifth, and that included the White House physician. But now you had Ron Klain come in, and he actually did talk for a while. And you have the other advisors like Ricchetti, longtime Biden lobbyist. And you can only imagine what a longtime Biden lobbyist saw, knows, when billions and trillions of dollars moved out of that White House to the huge money vehicles. We're excited to dig into the transcript because I think that's where this ventures in potentially to the criminal territory. Like, we obviously have a constitutional abuse of the highest, degree when you don't have a president. But when you're actually moving money and connecting to like lobbying initiatives in favored classes through the vehicle of, Ricchetti and others, That's where I think things can, breach into the criminal area where you see forgery, bribery, and things of that nature. So his testimony is critically important.
I love that what came out of there was his administration was saying that his age was a problem, but it was a political problem, not an actual leadership problem. Mike, when they go through it, they're like, oh, like the perception of this is not great, but like him actually being capable of running the country, not so much of an issue for them.
Yeah, that dog doesn't hunt. Just like Hunter Biden saying, and I love this one, that it was an ambient problem. Okay, if there's one thing Sleepy Joe did not need, it was ambient. Like that is just not going to fly, and he's already walked it back. But yeah, this is part of just the liberal, worldview. They cannot comprehend that you actually need a president in charge of things. This is what happens when you breathe and live and eat the administrative state, and everything can be delegated upon delegation, and authority can be vested throughout a vast bureaucracy. You lose touch with that basic principle of no, for this system to work constitutionally and legally, you need one person in charge at all times. And I think they really lost sight of that. And maybe they never had sight of it the whole time, because going into the election, they knew they had a problem and they'd have to handle this presidency differently. And so them just treating it as a media issue, as a political issue, ultimately, I think is what could wander them into criminal territory.
Well, we should talk about your piece in a minute. But first, I mean, this really is this presidency as figurehead deal is what's really concerning here. We never want the executive to actually be a sort of shadow or figurehead for this large administrative state. So, in the course of the last few months, have we learned anything more about who was actually in charge behind the scenes, or is it still shadowy as ever?
Yeah, we've certainly learned, like, the emergence of Anthony Bernal and the long speculated role of First Lady Jill Biden, I think, has been really buttressed by a lot more evidence. I mean, nobody knew Anthony Bernal's name 5 months ago, let alone 3 months ago, and now he has certainly appeared as somebody that a lot of people have pointed to as essentially involved in the decision-making apparatus. And that's most interesting, not because of who he is, but where he was. It's somebody directly outside the traditional and official chain of command. So you can see how unusual this White House was handled. And I think the evidence of the First Lady's chief of staff, the work husband, whatever people want to call him, playing such a central role, really buttresses the theory that other people outside the White House were leading in. I think the answer ultimately lies in the decision memos that the first witness, Neera Tanden, laid out. She said the White House staff would write a decision memo and say, President, we want you to sign an executive order. It's going to be about rainbows and sunshine, and you're going to love it, and it's going to be great. It's the best thing ever. They would send up the decision memo to a cabal of staffers, which was managed by the chief of staff. Who was in that cabal? We don't know exactly, comprehensively, but they very well could have been people outside official positions and longtime family members and advisors. And then what would return to the official staff, Neera Tanden, would be the same memo with just initials on it for Joe Biden, JB. And after that, it would manifest into an executive order, which could have changed, in terms of what was actually said in it versus the decision memo. And I think once we really hunt down that process and look at the paperwork and establish the chain of command, we're going to know a lot more.
We want all rainbows and sunshine. We want all of that here. I don't think we're going to get it. If you watch The Blaze at all, you've heard Glenn Beck. I think his line was something like, Marxist, Islamists, and anarchists are going to work together and it's going to sweep across the country. Your article kind of touches on that a little, right?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really interesting and creative investigation that some of our guys did at the Oversight Project. Everyone, when you look outside of the No Kings protest, knew this wasn't like a modern day version of the March on Washington. The tone, tenor, style, the kind of violent rhetoric and the drapings of just angst and all the words you can throw at it were very different than what was historically presented as the context for it. And then also what CNN and others were trying to make it seem like a grassroots kind of just organic rejection of President Trump. So we knew that was, walking around the streets and observing this, not the case whatsoever. It was clearly coordinated and organized. So we went to the organizers, a group called 5051 that now goes by the name Flare. And if you look on their webpage, it is just abhorrence, violent, like rhetoric stuff. There's a reason CNN never showed it. But we basically tracked the social media connective tissue of it. We mapped. We did what's called an associational matrix. Guess what? The people who put together the protest all are hardcore. The term escapes, proper definitional cabining, but they're Marxists. They're communists. They're on the fringes. They're of the most extreme. They follow openly declared communists, like political accounts, media accounts and whatnot. They are so far away from what the Democrats are pretending is this new, like, Governor Bashir or Pete Buttigieg, moderate middle. And I think that is going to be the story of the next few years. You're going to have the veneer of the Democratic Party in the media pretending it's the same old kind of Bill Clinton version we're moderating. But underneath that really thin veneer is just a lot of unwell, agitated, hardcore, a lot of foreign influence vectors, by the way, individuals. And it's violence in the streets. And I think that's what people rejected after the summer of 2020. And I don't think there could be enough lying through the mainstream media to get people to believe, that they're seeing something different.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about it. It does seem like the work you're doing is so important to show people that this is a network that really is in large part created by NGOs and really a lot of it our own tax money. And people are upset about that. You see a response to it. So, I mean, do you think that is going to, the funding stream is going to dry up? I mean, it already has dried up to some extent from the federal government, and that will weaken these groups, or will private money just pour in and the Democratic Party will triple down?
Yeah, I don't think it frankly costs as much money to sustain this street action as people think. And, we've been living through this in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of social media attention on the protests outside Buttersworth. That's because DOJ was there and a lot of social media influencers. But that thing's been happening on a daily basis. And, you interact with these people and walk by. I mean, it doesn't take much to stage it up. And so, drawing out the NGO funding and stuff like that, I don't think will curb all of the street violence. I'll tell you what will curb it, and has not happened, though, is after California, there are promises by the FBI to track the money, the funding, and the organizers of these things that haven't manifested. And you saw these like ICE protests and people getting violent. They aren't really getting arrested. And people, protesting in the streets without permit, they're not getting arrested. In Washington, D.C., outside like the Heritage Foundation, you have people kicking people, pepper spraying people, spitting on people, air horns in people's eardrums. And the cops just don't really do anything. They'll take it on and they'll release them a second later. And so until the administration makes good on its efforts to really crack down on these things, and, the president had an executive order a couple days ago about making their urban areas safe. And, I walk past Union Station, it's still tent city there. And the National Park Service, Trump's National Park Service, is giving permits for non-peaceful protests. And so I want to see the follow through of law enforcement to really shut these things down. And until they do that, I don't think it's really a question of funding. It doesn't take too much.
Listen, Blaze is doing its part. Our own Steve Baker saw some of those protesters outside Butterworth's and offered to pay for their meals. And they didn't take him up on it. They said that's fascist MAGA food. We will not partake in any of that. By the way, the food is fantastic. If you're in DC, you should go. But I love it every time Mike comes on because he drops the little nuggets like that. And every time that he comes on, Matt, we always get comments from people. They're like, man, that Mike Howell guy, he's pretty smart. That's why we keep him coming around.
I had a good professor at the Claremont Lincoln Fellowship and Mr. Peterson there.
Oh, okay, sure. We'll take it. We'll end on a high note. Mike Howell, thanks so much as always.
All right. Thank you all.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with your replies right after this. Well, I have to tell you about The Cover-Up on Blaze TV. If you haven't watched it yet, you're actually missing something really big. It's a docuseries that lays out how the government and public health agencies lied to you during COVID. We know that, but it'll take you through all the origins of the virus to the lockdowns and the vaccine narrative, and honestly how big tech actually helped cover everything up. And we know that it wasn't about public health. It was about information warfare. Now, the first 4 episodes are streaming right now, and you'll want to go catch up because episode 5 drops tomorrow, and it's huge. It's called Muckraker and exposes how Fauci, Birx, all the cast of characters worked with social media giants to shut down the truth. It's not just censorship, it's actually manipulation at the highest level. So go to FauciCoverup.com/mandate. Go binge the first 4 episodes and get $20 off your subscription. Again, it's FauciCoverup.com/mandate.
Dan Bongino posted a cryptic message on X the other day.
I read it.
Yeah, he said, it shocked me. What I found out at my time at the FBI has shocked me down to the core. We cannot run a republic like this, and I'll never be the same after learning what I've learned. I'm not expecting you to answer for him, but have you felt that way when you've being there?
I have seen up close and personal the tactics that are used by those who care more for themselves, their ambition, their job, their influence, their political interests, their selfish, self-serving interests than they care about the Constitution.
Well, Dan Bongino's cryptic message from the weekend, it still haunts us, especially after Tulsi Gabbard just keeps dropping all of these new bombshell document drops. So I posted on X, what do you think that Dan Bongino saw to make him say this? Seashell starts us off. He saw a cabal of well-known dirty players who are looking to always retain their power at the expense of the American citizens and the Constitution. Matt, cabal of well-known dirty players. I mean, he's probably not off. That's probably going to cover a lot of options.
I mean, a cabal of well-known dirty players looking to always retain their power at the expense of American citizens. That sounds like he looked at Washington, D.C.
That's just the state of play right now. Let's go to get to 48 HD Panhead, who wrote, I get the feeling that there's going to be a lot going down real soon, like expose our whole system down. Might as well throw COVID, Epstein, JFK, RFK files in there so we can truly rebuild. What a time to be alive. That's not boring right now. That's certainly not boring this week. Last week, the news cycle is going crazy.
I do feel like it's a great time to be alive, certainly. I mean, the cynic in me wants to say, nah, we're not going to get all that stuff. But there's something to what he's saying in that once you really start, you peel back a certain layer of the onion, it feels like a lot of stuff will just kind of flow out. And that, I feel like, is what we're actually dancing around here, is actually getting deep in there and letting some of the stuff, the real deep rot, show itself to the public. And once you shine that light, who knows what else you'll find.
And Bama conservative rounds us out here, who says, I think it's a typical Con Inc. grifting advertisement for his future book once he retires from the FBI. And I said I'll never be the same after what I learned. Now you can go purchase my book to read about what I was talking about. He's got a point. I can't say that Bama conservative is necessarily wrong.
Well, everyone would be interested in buying the book, right?
That's the whole point.
But I don't think Dan Bongino, he's a good salesman. Obviously, he's a great influencer, as they say, a good media guy. But I actually think he's being very sincere in what he says.
As we say, Dan doesn't need the money. He's made a lot of it in his career. He's done very well for himself. But as we go through and just look at not only just these replies, but everything else that we've covered in the show today, Matt, it's just investigative journalism actually means something. Mm-hmm. That when you look at the years and years that it has taken us, and somebody like Tulsi Gabbard becoming the DNI that goes through and goes, you know what? I am actually going to do the thing that nobody else has done before. And you see the levels of investigations that go through that have covered this, from the independent journalists now with the actual people that are in a very, very small group of that intel community right now. But it goes to show how powerful this actually is.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that this is a very difficult thing to pull off. It takes a lot of time. It takes people who are busy, focusing and looking closely at documents, and it's sort of a group effort, whether it's within one organization or it's all these different media outlets on the right. Like, we're happy to work with the Federalists. We love them, love Sean, love Molly Hemingway and her husband Mark. These are great people, and they're all
He's investigative as well.
Yeah, and they're all doing this kind of work. And so what you see now is the complete shutdown of the legacy media. They cannot do this work. They will not do this work. They can't touch this story. This is the hill they're going to die on. And so how do we kill them? Well, we have to take it to the next level here at Blaze. And, we've been doing that over the last year. This is why I brought on Mike Howell as a contributor to, Blaze News. Blaze News investigates every Thursday. you'll see Blaze News investigations with friends like Howell, who's a contributor, or Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman, who have done amazing work together, or own Jill Savage, who people may not realize is sort of a shadow director of investigations around here, working on a lot herself over, especially over the last 3-4 months. And so this is a group effort, and it's going to take time to build out all the things that we need in order to do that. So that's why we need your support. And that's also why I'm excited about the future, because we're going to keep building this thing. And that means, we need more shows. We need more than just one episode a week on Thursdays dedicated to Blaze News Investigates, looking at these investigations around and looking at what other people are doing as well and having them on the show. These are the sort of deep dives that we have to take on now, because the New York Times and the Washington Post are not going to do this. And now, look, a lot of our people are in power. They still need to be held accountable and pushed. That's our job. But we have more access, right, to the administration and a lot of things around town than ever before. So we need to take advantage of that to actually bring to you, the audience, the kind of deep dives and real investigative journalism that you need in order to make informed decisions about what the hell's going on. And as I like to say, billionaires and regular people alike have no idea how the system works, because the system hides itself, and we're going to shine a light, a brighter and brighter light on its grubby little self.
Yeah, and I can't wait because we know Steve Baker is going to be just covering all of the new J6 subcommittee that is going out. He's walking the halls here at the Blaze, and he's on the phone constantly with people to make sure that he brings you the latest information from January 6th, because we know that people still care about it. People still care about the Russiagate stuff. And you know what you actually get here at Blaze News is the actual stories that are coming out. The New York Times today with John Brennan and Clapper, no, they were setting the record straight. They were telling you straight lies. But yet, this is what is all the news that is fit to print.
Oh, yeah. And meanwhile, our own Joe McKinnon and our editor Courtney Weil got a great original quote the other day. Matt Taibbi, congratulated us for. You see, we're all like slapping each other's, high-fiving each other's hands, outside of our organizations. It's kind of the super friends coming together to actually investigate these stories and bring more and more. But, think about all the content we need. We need more documentaries, right, that go into this in an exciting, entertaining way. We need more shows. As Elon once said, he wanted 69 minutes, which is his version of 60 minutes. But we need a real 60 minutes, right, all the time, with more and more heavily produced stuff that actually takes you inside the federal government with what the Trump administration is doing. And, the sky's the limit to where we can go, but we all have to band together, and we have a lot more work to do to get where we need to be, which is actually leading with the kind of quality that you used to get in the old school media when they had tons of money that they just ended up pissing away and are now dying on the hill over. I mean, they're committing suicide in front of our faces. So we're going to be the ones who aren't just reacting, but are proactively bringing you the truth.
I like that you said everybody was like high-fiving, giving each other, the applause that they deserve, because it feels like, there's the legacy media over here, and then there's like the independents and all that. Like, we're all in this together because we know what we're fighting for, and all of us are fighting in that same direction because time is precious right now. And I keep looking at the clock and I'm like, oh man, it's only 3.5 years left of the Trump administration, but really, we're almost back into midterms again. You see all of the dynamics that are playing out. We've already had people on the show that are going to be running in primaries, and we'll continue to do that. But like, the clock is ticking, and it's something that I continuously emphasize because it matters so much right now, every single day.
Yeah, look, there's not a lot of time. We wouldn't know how much time we have. And if it's just this administration, we have, a year and a half, maybe. So to really get things done. So this is really, really important. What I love to see now is, I think with us and most of these other right-leaning networks, this is a friendly competition between us, right? Because we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all being vindicated right now for being in the wilderness for so long and being persecuted for so long and being censored for so long. And now all of a sudden, we're in a race to the top, not the bottom, where our friendly competition is, oh, I just found this. Oh, thanks. You just found this. And that is a healthy thing. And we're going to keep that ecosystem healthy and thriving. We're going to build it, and it's going to be bigger and more beautiful than ever.
And I'm not mad that we're playing the hits right now. It's the Clintons, it's the DNC, it's the George Soroses, the Steele dossier, Russia. Like, but we're right. I love it. I love that it finally came out. No. You guys who were telling us we were wrong the whole time, well, take a look at the documents. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.